Over the years, we have noticed that there is a huge lack of productivity in testing over GeneXus applications. As we already know, developing applications with GeneXus results in very high productivity in development cycles, since it allows us to easily introduce changes. The problem that we see is that this productivity does not translate to the testing processes, especially when we are doing manual testing, which can be very time-consuming. As a result, our testing efforts can't keep up with the development process, creating a visible gap over time as indicated in the graph. We need to find a way to test frequently, not only the new features, but also run regression tests on old functionalities to check if the changes that we made have introduced any bugs to our application. The way in which we can bridge this gap between development and testing is to include test automation in our testing process. One of the advantages that test automation brings is the ability to increase test coverage. And by test coverage, we mean the number of features that are tested out of the total. The procedure followed to automate tests implies using a work methodology which brings certain order and quality to our testing process, as well as generating documentation, some of which can be even generated automatically. Another main advantage is that it allows us to generate repeatable tests. The same automated tests can be reused to run on different platforms and over different environments, and they can be set to run unattended. And by running them automatically, the tests also run faster, which allows us to find and fix bugs earlier on the development cycle, which will decrease the cost of bug fixing. All of these result in higher productivity for the team, since the person in charge of testing can focus their time testing more complex scenarios while the automated tests run, which increases our product's quality. So, if all of these advantages are so straightforward, we might ask ourselves, why are companies reluctant to start automating tests? There are several myths of test automation that sometimes lead to companies losing the initial motivation to automate. It's sometimes seen as too complex, or it's assumed that qualified staff with programming background is needed, or even that the maintenance of the test cases will take too much time, which leads them to conclude that they don't have time to automate, which is what we hear them say the most. Even though test automation does require some initial time to use to design the test cases, the return on investment becomes quite evident when we start running these test cases constantly in an unattended manner and without having to dedicate our time and efforts to manual testing. So if we invest that initial time from the start, it will help us from falling into a very common situation, which is to go from not having time to automate to end up having no time because we didn't automate in the first place. So let's move on to have a look at the tool that will help us on this process. GXtest is a tool to automate functional tests over GeneXus applications. It is strongly linked to GeneXus, and we're going to have a look at how it works. As you may know, GeneXus works with a knowledge base that contains all the business logic, which is, and with this knowledge base is that web applications and smart device applications are generated. To use with GXtest, GeneXus generates a smaller knowledge base containing only the web panels and controls. This smaller knowledge base is imported into GXtest, and the test cases and data pools are designed to test the application. So in this way, GXtest works directly with controls designed in the knowledge base and not over the structure that is generated to create the application over the code, as other automation tools for functional testing do. And among the main advantages that this brings is that there is no need to change any of the test cases when we switch versions of GeneXus or when we generate the application for different platforms or languages. We will be able to reuse the same automated cases for all those scenarios. We will now have a look at the other key features that make GXtest our ally at the time of automating tests. To start with, it's very simple to learn how to use. Many automation tools for functional testing create the test cases coding, which means that to design or change any of the cases, programming knowledge is needed. GXtest represents the test cases using a model approach through an oriented graph that relates objects, test cases, and conditions. The actions are created associating commands and controls that are selected from the knowledge base's components. As a result, this could be done for anyone without programming knowledge or GeneXus knowledge at all, and it is quite intuitive. Anyone can learn to automate tests using GXtest. We will now see a short example of how to create a test case using the tool. To do this, we'll use the record and playback functionality. So we just need to enter a name for the test case, and we will select the option to generate the data pool and start recording. All the steps that we do in the web browser will be recorded to generate a test case. The functionality we will test now is creating an invoice. So we'll have to enter a client's first name, the product name that we're buying, and the quantity. And something else that we can do while we're recording is include validations. In this case, we'll test that the total 427 is seen. So to do that, we'll click on the right tick here and select Verify Control Text, which will include the validation. We will confirm, and as this is our last step, we will now stop the recording. And we can see that the test case is generated on the tool. Once we have the test case, we can inspect each step to see the generated commands. If you want to change one of the commands or edit it, we can click on it. And to modify it, we just delete what's there, and we will be able to select any of the existing controls for the object, which will be listed. For now, we'll just leave the same button there. We can also see all the data that was used in the recording, which is saved into the data pool. These were the same things entered while recording in the browser, and if we wanted to, we could edit them or add new data to run more test cases. Another interesting feature is the one-click startup. With just one click, we can generate from GeneXus a GXtest project. What it will do is, for each transaction, it will automatically generate the basic test cases to create, search, update, or delete. And it will also create datasets for testing, following the established rules for each data field. It will also schedule a test execution to run each night. So what this is used for mainly is to run smoke tests before we start a more complex testing process. And it gives us a good base to start building a test suite. It will save us a lot of time and gives us an almost immediate return on investment here. Let's have a look at an automatically generated project that we already generated from GeneXus. So all the folders here are associated with one transaction each, and here we have the data created for each of them. If we have a look at the city transaction, we will see that the main test case has all the basic ones to insert, delete, and update. And if you have a look at the data pool for that same transaction, we can see that it has randomly generated data, all valid values that it takes. Another valuable feature is the easy maintenance of the suite. When a change is made on the application, a new knowledge base must be generated and updated in the GXtest project. One of the tool's advantages is that it's able to compare the new knowledge base against the old one, detecting any changes once it's imported. Once that is done, it will inform us of the changes that were found and if any of them have affected one or more of the existing test cases. Some of the changes will be updated automatically, for example, when a control's name is changed. And in other cases, it will report the problem and suggest a way to fix it. For instance, if a control has been deleted, it will suggest disabling the test cases that use it or ask if you want a new control to be used instead. This allows us to update the test cases in very little time whenever we introduce any changes. And if we were using an automation tool that wasn't so tightly linked to GeneXus, what we would have to do is to keep a record of which test cases use each control, so when a change is made, we can go and update it manually. I will now show you a brief example of how this works. Let's suppose we had a control named insert which was modified in the knowledge base and it's now called enter. To update the knowledge base in the GXtest project, we need to access the knowledge base menu and go to edit properties. And here we will change the old knowledge base for the new one. After we do this, we will be able to select the update knowledge base information. GXtest will analyze and compare, and it informs us that 4 objects have been modified and it affected 1 test case. Once we go to the affected test case, it's telling us that every occurrence of insert will be replaced by enter. And if we accept the replacement after applying the change, we can see how it was automatically changed. The last feature that I wanted to mention is that GXtest automatically generates documentation. For many testers, finding bugs in the application is not the most tedious aspect of testing, but documenting these processes. Creating the document with all the steps and data that were used to find the bug takes time and it can be quite boring. So with GXtest, all these documents are generated automatically after each test run. It generates either a web document or a Word document, which makes it also a good tool for reporting errors found during testing. This is an example of a Word document that was automatically generated after a test run. As you can see, it first lists a summary of each of the steps that were run, and for each of them it indicates if it passed or failed and the response times. And if we scroll down, then we can see that for each of the individual steps, it has a more detailed description, screenshots highlighting the interaction with the user interface, and all the relevant data that was used to run the test. So now that we've covered all the main features, we can compare the tool against the myths that we mentioned earlier. So while it is thought sometimes that automation is complex, with GXtest it's very easy and intuitive, and anyone can learn how to use it. The maintenance of the test is easy and guided. It gives us a quick return on investment and also generates documentation automatically. Apart from the features that we have covered, it has many other advantages that help us to ensure the quality both of our testing process and of the final product. It allows to run the tests unattendedly and over different browsers. It also gives us the option to generate scripts for performance testing with JMeter. We can test our application over smart devices. We have custom commands and web services, and it integrates with other applications. We have here left a list of links that can be of interest. And that's it for the presentation. We will now have some minutes for questions.